And all right, I think we're all set. So welcome, Justin.
Hey, how you doing?
Let's go, Justin.
Yes.
Sorry, I've been inspired this morning. I'm ready.
That high energy. I know.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, Justin. I've been looking at some of your online videos, and man, your workshops just look so. I mean, your speaking events are so vibrant. It's great to bring a piece of that culture and yourself and share it with everyone. So there's just like so high energy.
Thank you, man. And it's research based for me. So I did one of my MBA was in organizational leadership and organizational learning, but then I did more master's work in around human resource development. And one of the things we learned in just adult learning that people actually remember more when they're having a good time doing it.
Yeah.
And so there, for some reason, and I ran into this just even as I began into my career, I ran into this thing of you either had to be very stoic and research-based and share that 72%, right? And or you're like, and you had no message, right? And people didn't walk away with practical content. But I was like, why do we have to sacrifice one for the other? Why can't we give really good practical takeaways that are research-based, but then do it in a fun way that people actually remember more when the dopamine is being released and more memory impressions are being made? And so for me, it's really a great scientific experiment just to help people remember more while they're having a good time doing it.
Like the body and the mind and.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, and the thing is, Justin, in my work, I mean, I work a lot with compensation and pay and on that side of the pay. So I'm in the numbers all the time. So I'm not that much of like an exciting person when it comes to work. So I get inspired by it.
I love you, but I stayed away from you because you were the HRM side. I did a human resource development, not the management side. So I was like, I applaud your management people.
Hey, Justin, I'm right there with you.
Yeah,
I'm the HR talent management chick, Yeah. And but HR can be labeled as pretty boring too. They don't typically like us that well. Yeah. But that's why I find talent management and organizational development far more exciting.
100%. We are not all Tobys. We are not all Tobys.
Yeah.
Everyone was so high energy at 100. It would be too much, Like we need our yang, Like I think it's good to have some calmer people as well. Otherwise, like you were doing the woo, it's too much of that, and then no one's getting from anybody.
Oh, I love it.
It's going to be good. And so, Justin, where are you broadcasting from today?
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Ah, nice.
Yeah. Yes.
Shara's in the sun and down in Mexico, and Jules is in LA, and I'm in cold Colorado.
Okay. Two places I love. Congratulations on your win, Jules.
Just loving the journey.
Yeah. Congratulations on the wonderful land of LA Rams.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, I don't know anything about football, but the halftime show, I was there for that.
Yeah. It's interesting. It was good for me, but it wasn't great. Like, so part of me, like, I was grateful that hip hop had an opportunity to be showcased in a major way, but I am more of a performance person. So like probably my best part of that was Kendrick Lamar's because it was more performance, right? So I'm more land on like Bruno Mars, Beyonce, Prince, because I like the performance. The music was great, but hip hop is not normally known as performers, right? And they're great music, great beats, get you involved, but it's not normally a performance. And so it was good for me, but it wasn't great. It wasn't Bruno Mars great. I want to come out like, boom, come on, y'all, get the beat. No, it wasn't Bruno Mars.
I get it. I think also too, it was so hyped. So I was expecting something along those lines. And I thought Eminem would do more. I didn't expect 50 Cent to pop out of like the ceiling.
The Spider-Man.
So I can see your point with that. I think it was just like the nostalgia, like when you grow up listening.
Yeah.
And when you live in California, I don't know, just like was it was nice. But yeah, I agree. Like Prince's halftime show.
Yeah. Howard. Woo!
Hi, Howard.
What a nice welcome.
Yes, welcome, Howard.
How are you?
Oh, we're loving the journey. We're just following Jules' lead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I stole from Justin, so yeah, I have to give credit where credit's due.
So as people join up, I mean, we are starting to have some of our listeners join in. And so no, we're going to be just chatting for the next 3 minutes or so. We'll get started at the top of the hour. If you happen to be on social media or LinkedIn or Facebook, we'll all get started at the top of the hour. So we're just having a bit of a chat here in the pre-show.
Yeah. Justin's getting us all hyped. So
that's right.
You're not ready for the pre-show. You're not ready for the pre-show.
Oh.
one of our sponsors actually helps us to grow your hair. So.
Oh, I can use that.
Do you have like a box of props and wigs, Justin?
I do. So, I do it to prove a point. It's when I do my for one of my presentations, I do James Brown, and so like I'll put on that and have my little jacket and do a little James. It's to prove a point, right? So kind of creating a memory impression to kind of highlight a point, but that's one of the little props that's there.
That's great.
What else is in that box?
Well, I got a sparkly glove, my drums. That's another thing. You can't give it all away. People have to be surprised during my presentations. Jules, you can't give it all away.
All right, so next time we have you back here, we expect full costume.
That's right.
We have higher expectations now. Now that we know who you really are.
Yes, it has to fit that presentation. So it's interesting for me. So I come from HR. I was in global HR and training and development, and I can't stand icebreakers. I just hate them with a passion. Because normally what normally happened is it didn't make sense. It was just kind of a random thing thrown together, and it didn't actually flow with what the idea, the strategy, or the mission of the meeting. And so while I'm not against icebreakers, I like doing things that ultimately tie together with things, right? And so as a great example, I used to do a crossword puzzle thing, right? So I'll do a crossword puzzle. The teams would have to figure them out. You give them, they come around and give them a clue, because most of the time at that point, it was all about communication and collaboration, right? And so I'd give one person a Snickers bar, and they were trying to figure out what is it, right? Or a Sprite, and they wouldn't know, but it would actually be their phrase that they had to figure out. But ultimately, everyone was missing one letter that another team had, right? And so then we talked through their process, and people hoarding the information no, that was my Sprite. I thought you just gave it to me to drink, right? Or people felt like they had to operate in silos, but really it's how they communicated and collaborated together. And then we're able to kind of launch into the meeting, but it had a mission, it had a purpose, right? It wasn't just, let's just do something fun and call it an icebreaker. So anyway, sorry for those who do the normal icebreakers. I apologize.
Pet peeve icebreakers.
Yeah.
Hey, Sumit, welcome.
Sumit, woo!
Hi, everyone. Hi, Justin. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, brother.
All right,
you can see Sumit. He's very chill.
Yes.
All right, started.
Yes, let's get kicked off.
All right, I feel like we're so warmed up now. Justin's been hyping us all up, and I know he's hyping everyone watching, all of our attendees already. Thanks for hopping on. And welcome to the People's Strategy Forum, everyone. My name is Jules. I help to host this forum each and every week. And we have an awesome guest speaker with us today. We're talking all about the inclusive mindset. That's kind of the topic and theme we'll be diving into today. And I will introduce our speaker in just a moment. Now, did we change this up, Sam?
We did. So are we looking at the new slide for our podcast?
Lovely. So
yes.
And our description of the forum as well.
Yep.
All right, perfect. So new changes popping up. So our new logo, our new description of the forum. And if you've never been to a forum here, I am seeing some new faces. We want to officially welcome you here. If you got on, signed up and you don't know what's really going on here, we always have a really fun panel of hosts. We always bring a guest speaker to discuss different topics, and we try to do it in a fun way. You know, we try to keep it conversational, but we also want to cater the conversation to you and your needs and what you might be experiencing as well in your current position. So if you have any questions at all or any comments, feedback, we love to hear it. So put it in the chat if you're on the live stream. And if you are going to be watching this a little later on another platform, no worries, still put your questions in because we'll make sure those get answered for you as well. So again, my name is Jules. I'll be on the sidelines in the chat there. You can come talk to me, drop your questions. But we also have the lovely Shah joining us. She's a regular here. She has gone from being a HR professional in the corporate world to working as a career coach. She's an entrepreneur with her own business. And it's called Rocky Mountain Health Advocates. And I'm very jealous because I see those palm trees in the background. She's living the dream over in Mexico.
Well, yeah, I think Sam said, hey, Shar, if you want to talk to people about having a career, well, show them where you live. So yeah, this is my backyard.
Very nice.
Showing it's very possible to work remotely, be successful, but also enjoy paradise each and every day.
Right.
We also have Sumit. Now, Sumit is joining us from India. So it's kind of a late night for him. We always love when he manages to hop on. He is a strategic HR consultant, talent management expert with over 16 years of experience. And he's worked with some of the biggest organizations in the world, including Deloitte and Accenture. We're very happy to have him hop on today. We also have Howard. So Howard is, actually he works alongside the crew at Comp Team. He's a compensation advisor and a strategic HR consultant as well. And he has decades of experience implementing successful compensation plans into different organizations, regionally and internationally as well. And lastly, we have Sam, who brings this forum to us each and every week, brings all of our fabulous guest speakers on board. And he is the founder and CEO of Comp Team. And Comp Team helps other organizations implement better talent initiatives and compensation programs. And he helps with talent management as well. So as you can see, we have a very expansive range of experience here, a lot of fabulous people helping you along the way. And lastly, I want to introduce our fantastic guest speaker. He's been hyping us up all morning already, so I know you're going to love him. A lot of energy. I am talking about Justin Jones-Fosu. Now, his proudest accomplishment is being a full-time dad, family man. We love to see that. But he is also the founder and CEO of Work Meaningful. He's an author. He's got a couple of books. I can see his book, The Inclusive Mindset, in the background there. He's also worked with plenty of large organizations, Mercedes, Home Depot, Toyota, to name a few, and he speaks over 50 times a year. So he's a professional. We're so excited to have him here talking to us on the topic of the inclusive mindset. There's our topic there. And welcome, Justin. So happy to have you here.
It is so good to be with you all and to see so many awesome, amazing people. And yeah, so those palm trees, this is my background. It's no palm trees, but you know, it's here. Yeah.
It's a lot of knowledge there, Justin. So tell us a bit, Justin. I know that and you have a very diverse background. You know a lot of different things. You mentioned about your HR background and also speaking in front of not only professionals, but students and so forth. You've inspired a lot of people. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah. So one of the things for me is I like long walks on the beach now. But I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, right over here. And one of the things is I loved how I was introduced to diversity and inclusion. And my diversity and inclusion hero was my mother, right? I affectionately call her mommy. And, one of the things that I loved about my mom was that even though growing up, we didn't have a lot of money, she would take us to like the Salvation Army to get clothes before it became cool. And she would get like little sweater vests and bow ties trying to create a Boys to Men group. But the interesting thing is that my mom took us out to experience diversity and inclusion. And so we went to Oktoberfest and Polish festivals and Hispanic Heritage Month festivals, all of these things, but we also brought it into our home. And so, we had exchange students from France, Brazil, Germany, Japan. And I remember just even as I was working on kind of the concept of the inclusive mindset in the book, and I started asking questions because often, we think we're really smart, right? And we're like, yes, I came up with this philosophy. And I realized I actually got it from my mom, right? And so I interviewed my mom. And one of the things that was probably stood out the most to me is that my mom shared that she was one of the first Black female air traffic controllers in the Air Force, right? And she said, Justin, there was times where she'd be stationed in Japan for 2 years. And there were some soldiers who had the opportunity to, but never left base. And my mom said, I never wanted you and your brother to be like that, to never leave your home base and experience the beauty in the cultures of the world around you. And so for me, my influences into the work I do will start from my mom. Now, that's the great side. Now, my mom hated my energy. Right? So she was like, Justin, go sit down somewhere, right? But I realized that I was able to harness this energy in a positive way to speak with my audiences and to do a level of consulting with clients to make a fun experience about sometimes some really tough topics.
Yeah. And I imagine that just the skill set of getting in front of people and so forth. I mean, is this just part of your innate personality? I mean, how did you become such a dynamic speaker and in front of all these people of different cultures and mindsets?
Yeah, I think it's some may be personality, but with what they call it, the 10,000 hour rule that Malcolm Gladwell, that really came from the 10-year rule from previous research. But the interesting thing is that I've just been doing it for a long time. I've been speaking since I've been in high school. I used to compete in national oratory competitions. And I finished high school early, and so I was able to take 3 college courses. And so what college courses did I take? Golf, business communications, right, and speech. And I figured that I had no idea I was going to go into this industry. I thought I was going to be a marketing, CMO somewhere for Coca-Cola or something like this, which was one of my internships. And so I was like, that's what I thought I was going to do. But I thought you needed to be able to communicate effectively. You need to be able to golf to build those relationships and those deals. And you need to have effective business acumen. And so it's just been cultivated. Wow, I don't know how old I am now, but over 2 decades of working with speaking before people, and then now coming up on 15 years of my business.
Well, right now I'm so glad to have you here, because diversity, inclusion, and in this topic of how to, it's so important, not only throughout time, but especially important today, as we're bridging a lot of these new environments as we've gone through the pandemic and deal with the virtual environment and so forth. So I'm really excited to hear a lot about what you have to say today. One thing I want to point out is I did read a bit of your book, and it's so well written and entertaining. It's great. I love the cartoons that are in it. It's well done. But I have to say the most important piece I like out of it is the action items after each chapter. I mean, that really drives the learning and so forth. So so tell us a little bit about the inspiration of the book and how come you're such a great author in addition to a speaker, and this is your second book. So it's just impressive. I'm just impressed. I'm trying to write a book myself, and I'm having a hard time. So I'm just envious.
Yeah, I had a hard time too.
Justin just being like, "Let's go, Sam!" Right? Just on repeat. You'll get it.
Yes. So I'm really inspired by the people that I'm able to connect to. So thank you for all those who joined live, Anna, Daniel, Iman, and all those who had 305. I'm not gonna read the number, but the thing for me has been, as a person who's been doing D&I work for about 20 years. One of the things that I realized is I didn't like how it was being done. And not only did I not like how it was being done, but I made a lot of, working with organizations for over a decade now, made a lot of mistakes, a lot of failures. And I realized that we're approaching diversity and inclusion from a shame-based approach. So if you've ever heard somebody say something like, it's 2022 and you still struggle with, right? And we focus so much on where people should be that we haven't spent enough time focusing on where people can be. and realizing that all of us have a starting point, right? That none of us are at the same starting point of our journey. And at times, people who are more advanced in the journey or almost creating a place of shame for people who weren't as advanced as they were, who didn't know all the acronyms, who didn't know all the language or the lingo. And when you're already starting from a deficit, you don't want to engage. And so as I was in front of my audiences, there's so many times in working with organizations, you know, people started off the program like, all right, okay, what are you going to say? Because they've been damaged by some of the D&I work and workshops and things that have been presented because it came from a shame-based approach. And so I'm not saying my approach is the right way or the only way. I just realized that there was more of an opportunity to meet people right where they are and to say, let's go forward. Let's take a more inspiring approach so that when you look back 1 year that you've seen growth. The second reason that I think this for me was very important is because I really started hearing and diversity inclusion almost became a very academic thing, right? And so there's a lot of statistics and and studies show this and and I believe in statistics study. I'm a researcher. I love all that stuff. But one of the challenges is that we weren't connecting to the thing that were really transformative for people. And that was the heart. Yeah. Is that I started to find that a lot of people who had great head knowledge about diversity and inclusion, but very few people who had a heart knowledge about it. And where in the heart level is where I started to see transformation. What I mean by the heart level is when people encountered the power of people's stories, that proximity bred empathy for people. And as they learned about people, not the statistics, but as they learned about people that they chose to include in their circles of grace, their circles of trust, that they were able to better adapt, to better grow, to be able to hear perspectives. And so that's the second thing. The last thing that for me was an inspiration for this, I'll give you a bonus one, why I wrote it for real. The last thing is, because I've been doing the work before I wrote this book, but is we made it a kumbaya experience. Where we all hold hands like kumbaya, diversity, right? And so that was kind of the perception around diversity and inclusion, but it's not, right? It's real diversity and inclusion is when I can disagree with you yet still respect you. It's when I can vehemently disagree with your ideology and yet passionately pursue your humanity. And so I wanted everyone to see that it's not about agreement. It's not just about the big three in terms of race, gender, and sexuality, even though those are major things that we need to think about and be addressed, but that every single person is a part of the conversation. No matter what you look like, no matter what your background, no matter where you come from, that we are all a part of the diversity inclusion conversation. Now, the bonus piece, why I wrote the book. My birthday is May 25th. And May 25th, 2020, George Floyd happened. And that was a major moment for me because I was doing a lot of this work at that point beneath the scenes, behind the curtains. I really wasn't promoting that I was doing it, but I was working with companies like Mercedes and Toyota and all these places, but you could hardly see it that I was doing it because I didn't want to be the Black guy who was doing diversity. I was like, I've been trained in leadership and organizational change and learning. I know this stuff. So my focus was meaningful work. And so how people can work to a different beat, how they can show up for work in unique and different ways, how they can bring their best self based upon a lot of job crafting research. And May 25th happened. And in a couple of weeks, I realized the information that I was presenting and giving to my clients, I wanted to give to the general public. And so initially, I just created these 7-minute episodes of Everyday Diversity, which I put on YouTube for free. And I took some of my top key concepts and put them on YouTube, right? And then I got such a great reception from that I decided to take a lot of the things that I'd been processing, working with clients, to make it a very practical, heart-based approach. And then that's where the inclusive mindset came from.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you mentioned in your book is the importance of mindset, and what you just mentioned, as far as you established that at the very beginning of the book, because when I open it up, it's the first thing is like, what kind of hugger are you? And so that's like, okay, well, this is definitely a different book. And so I was getting into that, but can you tell us some more about that approach?
Yeah, I know for those people are like, what? How does hugging have to do with diversity and inclusion? And one of the things is that, I love the aspect of, because everybody's a different type of hugger, aren't we? I mean, there's some people who are the if you touch me type of hugger, right? Some people have the handshake, some people have the I'm gonna dap you up, you have the side hugger, then you have that full-on frontal hugger. And for me, it's when you hug somebody full-on frontal, you get permission, hopefully with people you should know, please, HR. And, and you hold them, there's a place of vulnerability there. In that full embrace, there's a level of authenticity that happens for people. And so really where I'm challenging, encouraging people to do, not to go out hugging people, that's not the point of that part of the chapter, but it's that I hope at the end of the book, and as they continue along their journey, that they'll embrace diversity and inclusion in that same way, with a sense of openness, of vulnerability, of authenticity in their growth and their learning. Because oftentimes I find that we pretend, and the thing I say for myself is pretending isn't progress. So I'd much rather us be authentic, open, and honest with where we are in order for us to be able to grow. And unfortunately, we haven't created the space for people to share how they really feel or what they really think in their journeys. And so that's the piece about hugging. The mindset piece is such a big thing. And a shout outs to #Carol DeWitt, amazing researcher, awesome with the mindset, both in terms of growth and fixed mindset. And one of the things that I realized is that really diversity and inclusion, this work, it has to be, in order for us to grow in the ways that we want it to, a mindset, not an action, not something I do. It's just someone who I choose to be. And that's the unique component of this work, is that whenever it's just something that somebody has to do, something else, it's harder for it to live out in our everyday lives as things get squeezed. And so this is the thing that I share with key leaders and executives, is that we have to stop talking about diversity and inclusion as initiatives. Because with initiatives, you can start and stop those. But when we start talking about it and living it out as value, it's just a part of who we are, and we get better doing it. And that's the thing, is that we hear all these, well, we're going to have a diversity inclusion initiative. Well, okay. I mean, I hear the heart and the intent behind it. But when it's a value, you're not going to say, well, we're going to be a company that sells our products and our services. Like, no, that's just who you are. That's what you do. Right? It's just like, you get better at it. And that's the same way that for us to really embrace diversity and inclusion, and for people to have a sense of belonging within our organizations, that it has to be communicated and treated like a value rather than an initiative.
So maybe we should dive in just to the general understanding of diversity and inclusion. I mean, what is it? What is it not? And so forth. I mean, what are your thoughts there? I mean, how do we define it? And so because you mentioned before, it's not just gender. It's not just race. Yeah. There are more things involved here, right?
100%. I think sometimes it's helpful. And by the way, absolutely, Baldwin, yes, hugging is part of my culture too. And so sometimes it's different, like, it's difficult. For me, it's kind of all what diversity is not. So we said diversity is not a kumbaya experience where we all hold hands and agree. It's also not a place where it's not just the big three. And you know why I'm challenged by that? Because unfortunately, we've been conditioned to think about diversity as certain things, right? Now, everybody can give the right answer, but let me give you a great example. If you remember the primaries for 2020, and the newscasters would come on and they were like, welcome to WXTV. And they were like, they've just been to Iowa. They're headed to New Hampshire, but wait till they get to the more diverse states. Right. And I remember just screaming at the TV screen, like, no, like, I've been to Iowa and New Hampshire. They're very diverse. The question is, what type of diversity are we talking about? Right. And so I've encouraged people, as they talk about diversity, to use what I call prefixes. And prefixes are, what type of diversity are you talking about? Are you talking about gender diversity? Are you talking about ability diversity? Are you talking about religious diversity? Are you talking about racial diversity? What type of diversity? Because unfortunately, we've actually excluded people the way that we've talked about diversity and inclusion. And we've made it a certain thing, like we need more diverse hires. Well, what are you saying? We need diverse talent. I'm like, what do you really mean by that? And I love, one of my mentors, Susan Johnson from the Hartford. One of the things she says is like, I don't get what you mean when you say diverse talent. Because a person can't be diverse within themselves. The true essence of diversity is it takes two things that are different in order for it to be diverse. So that's what diversity is not. Diversity is also not what I call diversity. And I've realized this really powerfully, that everybody loves diversity as long as it's their brand of diversity, right? Or it shows up and it's about them, right? Now, what I'm not saying is that your specific differences aren't valuable and don't add to and don't contribute to society. I'm not saying that at all. But when it's only about you 100% of the time throughout all of society across the globe, that's not called diversity. That's actually called selfishness. Real diversity and inclusion is when I get up and stand up for the needs of others, even when it has nothing to do with me. Real diversity and inclusion is when I can value the humanity of the person, even if I disregard their ideology. A real diversity and inclusion includes all of us. And the reason that's so integral, unfortunately, many times I've gone into organizations and places and people have come up to me at the end and said, Justin, thank you so much. This is actually the first time I felt included in a diversity and inclusion conversation. Because if we all don't see ourselves as part of diversity and inclusion, we're unlikely to actually be a part of the solution. We know that that's leadership 101. If people don't feel that they've contributed to something, they're less likely to be a part of helping it to succeed. And that's the same thing that the same way we have to approach diversity and inclusion, is a way that all of us are a part of this, to value humanity, to respect others. And I'm not saying this is easy. This is not easy. There's a lot of challenges in this. I still am challenged by it. But when we come to that place, when we highlight, and give a greater view for those who are marginalized or underrepresented, we give people grace to make mistakes as they encounter the difficulties of the conversation, where we create a space where people feel a sense of belonging and being cared for. That is true diversity and inclusion.
Justin, this brings up a lot for me. So over 25 years in human resources, it wasn't until I would say 2015 where I actually saw a formal regional director of diversity and inclusion at a major healthcare system of over 160,000 employees. And I was the regional director of talent management. And the two of us really needed to partner on our talent management diversity and inclusion initiatives. I think what was interesting to me is that we spent a lot of time talking about the recruitment programs and looking at the affirmative action processes and looking at the age and the race, et cetera, of the hires and why those individuals were leaving. It was very pragmatic, very tactical, and it really didn't get to what you refer to as the heart. So I left, my team here knows my story. I left corporate in 2016 and started my own company. And I'm way more about diversity and inclusion now because I call it HR with a heart. That's my hokey little thing. But I would tell you that just also my experience now living in Puerto Vallarta now and running my business down here, I happen to live in a even more diverse community. I lived in Northern Colorado, which had absolutely hardly any diversity. And now I live part-time here in Puerto Vallarta. I definitely, not only has my community is a major melting pot with every single ethnicity, every single type, but also I think the LGBTQ community is also very prominent. And I don't necessarily think in the past that we spent time talking about that inclusion of that community and that identification. And also, I think now there's even new layers going on. And I hate to bring up an elephant in the room, but it is your vaccination status. And so now you layer that into not only your gender, your race, your sexual preferences, but now we have to add in your vaccination status preferences. And so I am watching in my communities, as well as in the workplace, as well as my employees, as an HR executive and talent management strategist, how do you handle in all of those new aspects of diversity? Because it's going to continually change, and more and more of those types of topics are going to be added each and every year. So what do you think about our new versions of diversity in your perspective?
Yeah, so for me, and first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story. If you would allow me the opportunity, that Colorado is very diverse. Again, what type of diversity?
Right. That's true. I probably sounded like one of those people you're talking about. I didn't come from a diverse state, but although I did live in Aurora, so hello.
Aurora, okay. I love Colorado because I love hiking and trekking, so I love coming out there. But one of the things is that a lot of the things that we're seeing as new forms of diversity aren't really new at all. They've actually been a part of the conversation for a long time. You know, people who are talking about, hey, before vaccination, it was shots, right? It was conversations about, do I want to get this shot or do I not want to get this shot? Do I get the measles shot?
The flu shots. Like I worked in nursing. Many of our nurses didn't want to get the flu shot, but they were forced to because of the policy, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of these things have been in existence, and a lot. What we end up doing is, this aspect of some aspect of confirmation bias, where thing that we think is right, we actually now look for the things that are right and that prove that we're right. And the number one thing that I would encourage people to do, right? And for me, I'm all about the interpersonal aspect of this that starts to transform the systemic aspects of what we do. And the big thing, it's going to seem really, really, really simple, but it's so powerful. Hear the stories of other people. Hear the stories. The reason that's so powerful is because I have this concept I call communicating in gray, right? Things aren't black and white as they seem. They're often gray, right? Even if it's 90-10 and 60-40, and I'm not talking about 50 Shades, by the way. They're often gray as we think about how we work together and think about things collectively. And so I've learned so much in just hearing the Power People stories. Now, that sounds really great. And you say, but Justin, oh, that sounds good. I'd love to hear the Power People stories. What do I do? Let's bring it back to, again, about practicality. A lot of times we confine ourselves to what I call our circles of comfort. That we only put people in our situations, in our environments, on our LinkedIn pages, and our Facebook friends that agree with us, at least on the major issues that matter to us, right? And I create the circles of grace, or the circle of grace concept, that help us to see why we see people in events the way that we do and what to do about it. And one part of that is developing, enlarging our circles to creating what's called meaningful relationships and exposure. And the reason I say meaningful relationships, it has to be deeper than, hey, I have 2 white friends, yay! We have to be able to talk about the hard issues, the tough topics, and still come back to this place of trust. And the exposure thing is where I want to take people to have a sense of practicality. I call it the Circles of Grace Challenge. It used to be the 6-month challenge, but people can choose how they want to do it. So the Circles of Grace Challenge is simply this. For me, every 6 months, I go to events, experiences, or I engage with people in either which I disagree or I don't know a lot about. Every 6 months, right? And I've learned so much. I only go asking 2 questions. 1, what did I learn about those events, experiences, or people? And 2, what did I learn about myself as I experienced them? Because I often find that when we hear and engage the Power People stories, that it begins to challenge our perceptions. It begins to allow us to see perspectives. I'm talking about really listening to hear people's journeys and perspectives. The second piece of that is some organizations have begun to do this for, people that I serve. I work with an organization out of Oregon, and they just finished out their Circles of Grace Challenge as an organization. And so we had our closing time when people talked about, like, wow, I never knew this even existed. Or I talked, straight to your point, you're somebody who chose to get vaccinated. Their Circles of Grace Challenge was unvaccinated. and to listen to their stories and perspectives. And they didn't walk away at every 6 months challenge or Circles of Grace saying, hey, I 100% agree with this person. But you know what it did? It did two things. One, it humanized it. And two, it allowed other things to come to light that we never would have thought of or experienced or even believed because we heard people's stories. So let me dovetail that and I'll end it here. Oftentimes I'm asked by CEOs, executives, leaders of organizations, Justin, how do we make our organizations more diverse? All right. And first question on what type of diversity are you talking about? Right? But anyway, but like, how do we make this a part of the fabric of who we are? You know what my first question back to them is? Tell me about your personal life. Who do you go to lunch with? Who are your mentors? What books do you read? People do you hang with? Who do you go vacation with? Who are the people that you have coffee with? That you go to golf or whatever you go? Because what I've found is the more that it's integrated into people's lives, period, the more you'll actually see it as a fabric of their organization and how it's lived out. Because guess what? They're meeting with someone who has a different ability or may be in a wheelchair, and that may be one of their good friends. Guess what? They think about their organization differently because they see the potential of their friend being in their organization. Can that person get around? Can they be able to go to the meetings? Are the elevators operating functionally? Are there ramps? And so the way that you see that, we saw a little bit of that, not as much as we could have, but for the Me Too movement, right? Is that some wives are coming back and sharing with their husbands their experiences that they had at work. And then they were like, oh, wow, I didn't even know you experienced that. And so there's a lot of things that I think that are in the power of people's stories that when we have an opportunity to fully engage, to hear, especially those that we disagree with, it better helps us to be able to encounter when we have these, quote unquote, new types of diversity that exist in our organizations. So before we go and create a strategy or plan for it, why don't we take a moment to actually sit down, hear people's stories, and then figure out ways to create policies, guidelines with them, not for them, but with them as a part of the solution.
Justin, I love that. And I think you're right. I mean, I really think about the people that I asked to go golf with or, go hang out with. And a lot of them look like me, right? So I 100% agree with you. One of my girlfriends visited me down here because it seems like I have a lot of visitors. But she dyed her hair black, right? It's funny, you had your little wig on.
Right.
And she usually highlights, as we say, in my age, highlights her hair. And she dyed it black. And she could not believe the way that she was being treated so differently at her work, at the grocery store. She's dating, meeting new people. She says, they're treating me like I'm more intelligent. Wow. Or I actually am not dingy like you, Shar. Like you, no kidding.
I was like, wow, that's pretty powerful, friend.
My friends and I, we joke all the time. But she's like, this is just the strangest. Hey, I don't know about you, Jules. Have you ever dyed your hair black?
I've always been blonde, but a lot of my blonde friends that went to when they went redhead, it was a different thing, but brunette, they have said the same thing as well, that people took them a lot more seriously. So I have heard that, yeah. And but I like being dingy too, so blonde it is.
Yeah, but it's just, and Justin, so yeah, there's all different types of diversity, right? I mean, even down to the color of your hair, even if you have facial hair, if you're bald or if you're female or male and you decide to have long hair, it doesn't matter. I mean, just your outward appearance. If you have a tan, if you don't have a tan. I mean, it's like as soon as people look at you, they immediately have a judgment about you, immediately have a bias. And for me, just living in a community that is as diverse as it is now and watching how employees act differently towards the gringos and now kind of realizing, I feel bad. That's why we tip pretty well down here, because they're not, the local community are not tipped very well here in Puerto Vallarta. But I just sit around now and I just analyze and say, we have so much further to go. We really do.
And I have, and that, just to speak to that point, I have so much further to go, right? As a person who has been doing this work for 20 years, it's like, and that's why I love the concept of mindset, because it's all about progress, right? That's why I call it the inclusive mindset. It's all about, it's not about perfect. I'm never going to be perfect at this thing, right? And I actually give people, a lot of my clients end up giving the book, one of my favorite fables, The Tortoise and the Hare.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of organizations that position themselves when an issue happens or something comes out, boom, right? And they're the hare. And then 3 or 4 years later, you see nothing happening in any meaningful way with that organization. Versus those that are tortoise-like, they're the ones that aren't going to make a big statement after something comes out. That's not the tortoise, right? The people who can make a statement, I'm okay with it, is those who've been doing the work already before the issue happened. Those are the people who can make a statement. If you hadn't been doing anything, I don't need to hear your statement. I want to see internal reflection, strategies, things. Some of my clients are asking me, like, Justin, what should we say? Should we put out a statement? And I was like, no. The first thing you should be asking is talking to your employees, asking, how are we as an organization doing on this issue, on these set of things, right? Working through having key meetings, not just meetings to meet, but key meetings to address the top 2 to 3 things that you can make progress over the next year on developing, right? And you still have a long-term plan, and then communicating that. And guess what? That may take 3 or 4 months, but that will have a longer lasting impact than being a hare and just changing your social media profile or creating a statement that has no meaning, right? And so that for me is a shift. It comes back to this, one of my concepts that for leaders, I think we need to continue to reevaluate is, let's stop talking about diversity and inclusion as a business case.
Yeah.
Right.
And let's move it to what I call a humanity case. Because it's the only reason that you want to create and engage more different types of diversity, whatever those types are, is because it makes business decisions, I feel like, a simple clog. I'm not the heart in HR. That's not who I am. I am a simple person, a commodity that you can do because it makes sense now. Oh, okay, here. And it doesn't actually, for those who are included, doesn't also feel good. But when it's done from a humanity case perspective, and what that means, because it's good. Because it's good for people to feel belong. When we treat our employees, our team members like family, right? When we see them as vital aspects of who we are, that allows us to dive deeper in the humanity of who we are. And the last thing I'd say, just kind of speaking to a different type of diversity, and I had no idea, right? I try to pay attention. There's still stuff I'm learning, y'all. There's a lot of stuff I don't know. Is when I started launching these shirts, diversity is dope. And by the way, dope is a good type, not the bad stuff. Okay, where I'm from, it means good. I'd explain, I was speaking for an international healthcare company. I had to explain, I was like, dope means good, where I come from. Okay. And I launched the shirts, and I decided to make all the sizes, no matter if it was extra small to 4XL, the same price. And you have no idea how many emails and things I received from people saying, thank you so much. For years of my life, I've been fat shamed. And I've had to pay what they call the fat tax. And so I want to say thank you for making them all the same price, no matter what extra small or 4X. Now I get it from the business decision. A business decision, it's less fabric. So I can make the extra small less money, right? I can be less than the 4X. But from a humanity decision, it was good for me to make them all the same price. So that just speaks to the different types of diversity that exist within our organizations and things we have to think about.
Yes. Well, how can leaders be more aware of these things? I mean, you thought of this, and we're talking about the intentionally inclusive leader, like in your book. So what are the things that they need to do to make themselves more aware in these things?
Yeah, so let me give you two practical ways to do this, because I think, it can sometimes feel overwhelming of like, how do I do? I'm a leader. There's a lot of stuff I should do. We have sales, we have vaccinations. Let me give you some practical things, right? I'm going to give it to you in what I call 3 ways. The first is, let's challenge the concept of the open door policy, and let's move to what I call an out the door policy. With open door policies, we wait and say, hey, if you have any issue, come to me. What I've been challenging my clients, especially in our employee engagement work, is how do we go to an out the door policy where we're actually not waiting for people to come to us, but we're actually going out and seeking them, right? How do we do that? Let me give you another practical way. Number 2. It's what I call, it's the only math you have to do today. It's called 1MC over W. And it's a mathematical equation I created that simply stands for this: 1 meaningful connection per week. As a leader, what if you built into your calendar 20 to 30 minutes each week that was simply focused on developing a meaningful connections with people on your team, with people within your organization, and learning and hearing their stories? What brought you to our organization? What brought you to our city? What brought you to Colorado or to wherever you may be across the world? You know, like, what are some of your interests or hobbies? Like, that's one of the things. And if you feel like that's too much, let's flip the W over. 1 meaningful connection per month. The focus is not perfection, but progress. And the last thing is, as you have those conversations, as you hear those stories, let me give you a practical tool I created to help us think through this, right? To actually really deeply listen to people. And it's what I call the power of 3. I found in my research that most people only listen to the power of 1 or the power of 2. And oftentimes it's because we're trying to make connections. Almost if I was, talking to Jules, I'm like, how you doing today, Jules? And Jules is like, I'm fine. I'm like, I'm fine too, Jules. That's the power of 1, right? Power of 2. How you doing today, Jules? Oh, I'm fine. Oh, what made you fine? I heard this interesting bald head speaker. I remember that bald head speaker. That's power of 2, right? But power of 3 is, how are you doing today, Jules? Oh, I'm fine. What made you fine? I heard this bald head speaker. Like, what did you learn? Oh, we talked about 1 meaningful connects per week, the humanity case. Oh, is there anything else I could? What ends up happening is oftentimes without malice, without bad intent, in ways that we're trying to connect with people, we actually start taking control of their stories. And in the power of 3, it challenges us when we go out in our meaningful connections to hear people's stories. It challenges us to actually dive into the 3rd level of the conversation. Because unfortunately, most people have been conditioned that we don't really care. Right? And I give you a great example. We talked about golf earlier, right? And it's like, a person's like, oh man, I had a great time on that back 9. And the lady they're talking about is like, oh, but have you been to that one back 9? Because that back 9 is phenomenal. We just controlled their story versus stopping and asking, what about that back 9 was significant for you? What did you enjoy, right? And so those are ways that as leaders, that 1, that we can move to an out the door policy. 2, we can schedule into our calendar 1 meaningful connection per week or 1 meaningful connection per month. And when we actually sit down with their lunch or coffee and hear the stories of our people, we can listen deeply with the power of 3.
That's an excellent tool. Sumit, I'd be interested in hearing it. I mean, do you see the connection in leadership style and the way that we think about diversity and inclusion differently and the different cultures you interact with?
Oh, most definitely, Sam. In fact, one of the things in this part of the world is traditionally there are certain religions and there's also something called a caste system where certain people within a particular religion have been more privileged. They've had access to the right kind of education and opportunities for the last many centuries. And so they've, and to put it in context of Justin's book, they're the ones who've got the right-hand paradigm. So you tend to think of stuff as privileges, and you start protesting when those privileges are taken away. So initially, there was a lot of resistance against the Americanization of corporate spaces where, for example, in government organizations, we've got a reservation policy, and people who belong to the downtrodden or the marginalized segments, they had a certain number of jobs and roles reserved for them. Similarly, people with disabilities had a certain amount of reservation. So that's a policy which has always been criticized by the so-called believers of meritocracy. And obviously, it's only the privileged people who talk about that. So inclusion and diversity is undergoing a lot of change and churn right now. There is a religious and a political angle to it as well. And I think we've started off on the wrong note with a lot of symbolism. For example, there is significant amounts of discrimination in this country, but you'd still find sports persons taking the knee. Even though on Twitter, they might be tweeting against, either staying quiet in the face of discrimination or actually advocating discrimination as role models. So there is a fair bit of lip service. I've been in an inclusion and diversity role earlier as well. And again, similar to the discussion we were having, the idea was, Sumit, create an inclusion and diversity strategy for the organization. We need more women to join us. And why? Because it's good business. Somebody somewhere read a research saying, if you've got more women in the workforce, you tend to be more profitable. Yeah. And my opinion was that's not how it works. It's not like having a certain number of so-called diverse individuals will magically propel you to the forefront. Right. You got to include them as well. So I think we're getting there. There have been some impactful campaigns by organizations like Accenture. They had a campaign called #InclusionStartsWithI. And that the intent was precisely to do what Justin just spoke about in terms of don't have an open door, walk out of the door and lead from the front, be intentional about your inclusion goals. And I think it's steadily changing. We've still got a long way to go. And the pandemic, unfortunately, has sent diversity for a major hit because traditionally women do have the primary caregiver role in homes and families. And even if there are no children in the mix, typically the housework in terms of cooking and cleaning, a large chunk of it falls to the woman. So because of the pandemic, diversity, I'd say, has taken a bit of a backseat, but I'm hoping that we'll continue to make some bigger strides soon enough.
I just love, Justin, what you said earlier, because so many organizations do, exactly what you had said about targeting specific initiatives or programs. And that's really not what it's about. And it's really stepping back and saying, it's not about this race, it's not about this gender, it's not about this disability. It's about including everyone and making everyone feel at home and special and they're valued. And that's so hard to do in an organization because organizations rush through solutions. It's just like, okay, we're going to have this program, we're going to target the X, Y, and Z and go. And they need to step back and say, what are we as an organization all about? And I don't know how you get over that mindset in especially US organizations, because they're always so quick to say, we have a problem, let's solve it.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. And one of the things it's key for me is my focus, and there's a lot of different approaches to this. My focus is an interpersonal approach. Like I want to bring back the heart, right? The heart of the conversation. I want to follow in Shar's footsteps in terms of HR with the heart, right? Diversity with the heart, right? And what I'm not saying is that there can't be strategic policies and things that happen, but it should not flow from the business case, right? It should flow from how do we exist in a space to make other people feel included, especially those who've been excluded. I used to be in recruiting, and I don't know what the numbers are now, but many years ago, 80% of new hires were brought on based upon people that were known in the company. And so if our organizations look a certain way, if they operate a certain way, then we're trying to be malicious against people who are different. It's just, we're bringing on people we know, love, and trust. And that's what's happening. And so, let's talk about another elephant with the Americanized NFL, right? I don't think a majority of these owners are like, hey, let's not hire some Black coaches, right? Like, I don't think they're out, but they're hiring their buddies, the people that they hang around with, the people that are in their circles, right? And so that's why my first challenge to people is enlarging our circles. Now, sometimes it can be helpful not to start off there, but it can be helpful to create and enact policies and to focus on specific issues. And sometimes that is helpful, but when we bring people together to first, not we do it for them, we do it with people. But the other piece that's missing is that oftentimes we do those things without telling people why. And that's why, and there's many different change management models. One of the ones I love most is ADKAR. Check it out, but it's awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And it's awareness first is, why is there a need for a change? D is the desire. How do we cultivate the desire for those who want to change? Where we normally start is in knowledge, right? Is what new knowledge do we need to have? Which is the K, and we missed the A and the D. We then give people the ability, and then we reinforce it. But we didn't first tell people why there was a need for it to happen in the first place, and then cultivate the desire. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that even if we do have specific strategic policies that are targeted to saying, hey, we've done a horrible job in creating a space that's available for those who have disabilities, specifically in mobility issues. Let's focus there, right? That's okay. The question is, have you had the conversations? Have you met with people? Have you talked to them? Have you included them? And now where have you made it possible to your people to know why that's a need? Last but not least for me is, it's one of the things I'm leaning into. And that's, I love what you said about, unfortunately, it's the university's taken a big hit because of the pandemic. And that's one of the reasons, like for this year, like every year we identify one or two organizations that part of our profits and proceeds go toward that embody inclusive mindset. And so this year, one of my 6-month challenges last year was, how do I better be an advocate for women in the workplace? Mm-hmm. And so I started diving in, and one of the things came upon this pay gap thing. I always knew the pay gap existed, but as I started to really dive into it, I'm like, oh man, 18%, and that's just for a certain section of women in the workplace. Mm-hmm. It's much lower for many other types of women, right? And so, like for us, we're targeting specifically, how do we help to end the pay gap that exists around the world? So yeah, so what I am saying, just for clarity, is my focus and my research is all about the interpersonal, but sometimes it is good once we take it from a humanity perspective to focus on specific policies and procedures.
Well, thank you. Justin, I complete, Justin, oh, sorry.
Oh, you okay there, Shar?
Got it. Sorry. Oh. I completely agree. I think that your talent management strategy needs to be a combination of everything. Be it compensation, it has to be about gender equality in every single aspect. Also, I think you mentioned earlier about the taxation. Well, in the grocery stores, you'll notice all the women's products like shaving cream, they have a taxation if the color is pink.
Yeah.
So just because the color is pink, we get charged an extra 18% just to have pink products that are the exact same for men. Also, I think that you might have a job opportunity, and you know what sports company I'm talking about, and it's called the Denver Broncos. So, we can't even, and I'm not a sports gal, but we can't even behave with professionalism and integrity with our hiring leaders when we're looking at our candidates. And I think the gentleman that's going after that, and I'm not a sports person or a political person, but I think that a lot of companies are learning the hard way about being that. Another thing I want to mention, we hire people in wheelchairs. We hire people of different languages. In fact, the gentleman that works in a wheelchair, he's paralyzed almost by his arms down. We actually hired all kinds of accommodation like drawer pulls and how we can operate our printers and do all the paperwork with his disability. We welcomed in the government that helps people with disabilities. And he's actually turned out to be one of our best generating employees and has had the best outcomes. And awesome. It is absolutely phenomenal. So yes, bravo to hiring people with disabilities as well.
For sure. So I do want to, I know we're quickly coming to the top of the hour, so I do want to acknowledge our next week's speaker. Justin, you've been so wonderful. So, but also I want to acknowledge that we have Gary Barnes coming next week. He's going to be talking about the 3 keys for success in any business. And so we're really excited to have him here. So always, Gary's been on our program several times, and so he's been a great contributor and a dynamic speaker. So happy to have him here. As we come to a close, I think we probably have time for just one question. Jules, does anything we want to bring up?
Yeah, so we've been talking about all kinds of diversity, and one question we did have about diversity and inclusion when it comes to hiring multiple generations in a workforce. Is there any advice that you or anyone on our panel has for organizations when it comes to hiring baby boomers and then the new Gen X employees? Because it seems like a lot of corporations are going down the new college grad and Gen X employees. So is there any advice around that type of diversity?
Yeah, so I'll give it from a macro perspective, and I'd love for anyone on the panel to jump in for the micro. From the macro perspective is to continue to hear the stories, to intentionally reach out and engage baby boomers and Gen X and Gen Z and millennials and asking of the questions. And there's been a lot of age discrimination that's been happening. I would do an exercise in some of my my workshops and have people stand up in time where they felt othered or less than. And when I mentioned age, oh my gosh, more so than ever over the last decade, I've seen more people who are older stand up based on age discrimination. And so there are opportunities, but I think one, it starts with hearing the stories and not assuming that just because a person is younger, that they're more innovative, that they're more creative in certain aspects. I love the movie that, I don't know if it's called The Intern or an Internship. It's a really, really good movie.
Right? Yeah, right. Yeah. It's such a good movie.
It's a good movie. So that's from a macro perspective, is hearing the stories and talking to, maybe making one of your meaningful connections per week, maybe be intentional, engaging that week people with different generations and asking about the company and how the company is serving them and the needs and the things that they seek out and that they desire and that they want. But now I want to turn it over to the panel for any micro suggestions that they may have.
I think that's great, but we are a bit out of time, and I do want to give the audience a chance, Justin, to understand where they can learn more about you, know what how they can engage you as a speaker or one of your workshops.
Yeah, so you can check out workmeaningful.com. Workmeaningful.com is the website, and the inclusivemindset.com leads you kind of specifically to that aspect on there, where you can check out the diversity of dope shirts and get the book, Inclusive Mindset. It really is a fun approach, but it's going to challenge you to think in a unique and different way about how you hug, but ultimately how you embrace diversity and inclusion as a way of progress going forward. So I hope that you would embody the Inclusive Mindset vision with me, and that my mom's vision would continue to live out, that we leave our home bases and experience the beauty and culture of people around us.
Yeah, let's go, Mom. Let's hear it from Mom. Yes. All of this. She's the reason we all were brought together today. So
yes, she is.
Like we've been getting a lot of good feedback in the comments. Everyone, Anna loved the suggestion to make that connection once a week or a month to hear from somebody who's different. And I love that. I want to implement more of that. I love the way you set that example, like of going back and forward. So I thought that was a great one. Thanks, Justin. Always amazing. Great session. So good feedback all around.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful. And the panel, y'all are dope. Y'all are amazing. Y'all are the good dope. And thank you, Yvonne, for coming over. All right. Bye, y'all.
Take care.
Thank you, Justin.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, Justin.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.